And welcome for people joining. Just waiting for a few more folks to join before we get the Transportation Tuesday webinar series started. Hello and welcome. We will wait just a moment before starting. There's a few more people trickling in. All right. Looks like we have a number of people joining us today. Thank you for being here. Welcome. This is the next installment of the Transportation Tuesday webinar series. The title of today's webinar is what transit riders are telling us. This is the third installment of four for the 2025 series. The next webinar will be September 30th and is titled What's Next for the Transit Fiscal Cliff? A conversation between Chicago and Philadelphia. The format for that will be a conversation between Leanne Redden, the Executive Director of the RTA, and Jody Holton, the Chief Planning and Strategy Officer from SEPTA in Philadelphia. Registration is available now for that one on the RTA website. We encourage folks to join us next week as well. So our agenda for today includes three presentations. First, RTA staff will share about our ongoing panel survey and dashboard. Second, we'll provide a first look at the 2025 Regional Customer Satisfaction Survey. And then third, we'll hear from CTA staff on qualitative market research efforts that they're working on, specifically rider focus groups. So we'll have some time at the end for Q&A. Feel free to place questions in the chat during presentations, and we'll handle all three at the end. Our presenters' names and photos are on screen. First, you're going to hear from Amy Hofstra. She is a strategic analyst at the RTA. She manages the quarterly panel survey and then coordinates research with academic partners addressing survey quality and applications to practice. Amy is also completing her PhD thesis on performance indicators at the University of Illinois, Chicago. Second is me. I'm Peter Kersten. I am the manager of strategy and policy here at the RTA. I've been at the RTA since about 2018 in a variety of roles within strategic planning and now lead the strategy and policy team, which market research and customer insight being two important areas of our work. And then third, we have Emily Drexler, who is a senior manager of customer insights and strategy at CTA. She leads the agency's customer market research program. Her work focuses on gathering insights about riders in order to inform strategies and projects that improve the rider experience. We also have some staff from RTA Communications that will be manning the chat and helping people if they need anything during the presentations. So, Amy, over to you for the first part of the format here.
Great, thank you, Peter. I hope everyone can hear me all right. Today I'm going to discuss with you RTA's panel survey and review some of the results and applications. Next slide. So the panel survey is, as it's obvious, is a survey that's conducted quarterly, given to transit riders in our region who have volunteered to participate by sharing their email address. Each wave, we get approximately 15,000 responses. And the surveys include questions that we include in every survey so that we can track and monitor responses, and as well as some special topics each quarter. So every survey will include questions on customer satisfaction, which you see in the diagram on the right of the screen. We also ask questions about public safety and service quality. Next slide. So some of the applications for our survey are listed in this slide here. Because RTA is the regional coordinating agency, we like to study trends in regional rider activity. So people who are using both two or more of our service providers. We also use the panel survey for omnibus reporting. At the end of the slide deck, I'll show you an example of the public dashboard that we maintain and is updated every quarter to share some of the information gathered in the most recent survey. And we also use our safety and security questions for briefings with elected officials and stakeholders and the public generally. Our survey is used in our legislative advocacy work for my colleagues who are in the governance department. Later in the deck, I'll show you a slide. So we've been carefully monitoring the funding gap that's impacting our region. And we have shared that information with our colleagues and monitoring how effective our methods have been at monitor or sharing and public awareness about the oncoming funding gap. And last of all, discuss some of our academic and research partnerships. We're working with the team at Northwestern. We want to understand how to build high quality surveys by understanding such issues as survey bias and how we can use our survey to monitor public perceptions of service. Next slide. This is an example of a paper that was published in collaboration with Northwestern, our colleagues Spencer Giannuti and Professor Stathopoulos, Amanda. That team there developed a sophisticated model in order to understand what they call transit or survival modeling. So if you look at the diagram on the right of your screen, an A would indicate the survey respondent accepted an invitation to participate in the survey, and the D would indicate that they declined. So somebody who did 5 surveys in a row moved across the top. But as you can see, there's not only do people decline to participate in the survey and then end their relationship with us, but sometimes there can be behaviors where people make sort of a zigzag pattern. So they accept and decline various survey invitations. So with this model, they were able to understand that behavior more accurately and confirmed that there is some systemic difference between the type of respondent who stays in the survey longer than the type of respondent who is more likely to drop out, and that people who have higher satisfaction are more likely to complete a future survey, which is important for us to know. Confirms that our efforts to recruit new respondents to our survey are definitely worth continuing. Next slide, please. This is an example of some of the timely topic or the special topic for the last 2 quarters that we shared with our colleagues who are in the governance department. So we wanted to know were our efforts at bringing greater awareness of the funding gap, were they effective for among our transit users? And so as you can see, comparing the yellow bars to the orange bars, the number of people who were in these last 2 categories who didn't know much or anything at all about the funding gap decreased between the winter and spring of 2025. That number declined from about 1/3 of respondents who didn't seem to know much about it, and we've brought it down to about 20. Next slide. And this is a snapshot of what you will see if you go to the RTA website and you look for our dashboard. On the right-hand side of your screen are the 3 customer satisfaction scores. which are updated every time we complete a panel survey. And we'll also include questions about public safety and personal safety. And in this example here on the bottom left hand of your screen, you can see that we've included a bar chart. We asked our respondents in this most last survey, Q2 of spring of 2025, what service qualities were important to them. We asked them to rank them. And you can see that transit funding is at the top of that list. So this is available from the RTA website anytime you would like to visit that site. I'm happy to take your questions at the end of the survey and discuss it any further. I think we can go to the next slide and we'll be discussing the CSS.
Thank you, Amy. I will share uh, initial findings from the 2025 Customer Satisfaction Survey, also referred to as the CSS. The Customer Satisfaction Survey is a program that was formalized in 2009 as part of the Performance Measurement and Reporting Program outlined in the '08 RTA Act Amendment, which called for regular reporting of various operational and financial metrics. So prior to that, each individual service board had their own customer survey programs to obtain feedback from riders. Each had their own questions, scaling, timing, making the information unable to be kind of consolidated or understood at the regional level. So think back to Amy's initial reference of this regional rider profile. The RTA proposed taking responsibility for satisfaction survey efforts, and then has led a working group comprised of members from the service boards who have come together over the past 14 years to collaborate on a survey instrument. Each survey consists of kind of a core group of common questions covering demographic usage and satisfaction information. And then additionally, each service board includes a set of questions that are germane to their own operations. The 25 CSS is the fifth large-scale survey effort that we've completed. I'll be presenting results today. Some of the results I'll show or most of the results I'll show in regional format. So if we look at all three together, I'll also highlight some differences between the three and then look at what's changed since the last time we conducted this. The effort has evolved over time in how we reach customers and riders, including email, online, social media, QR codes, and paper surveys. Another change with the 25 effort was the inclusion of more languages. Online CTA and PACE respondents could choose between English, Spanish, Polish, Chinese, and Arabic for response. A couple of key focus areas that we'll share about today. Who are our riders? How do they ride our system? What are they most or least satisfied with? And then where should we focus to improve their experience? What's kind of the most critical things? And then lastly, I'll touch on some next steps for the CSS as well as where you can find more information on this. So this year's CSS effort proved very successful with more than 25,000 responses. In 2016, we received 21,000. In 2022, we received 17,000. We began surveying with an extensive email outreach in January of 25. Displayed on screen, you can see survey methods by service board. All usable responses are weighted to match the onboard respondents' demographics, and we achieved margins of error ranging from 0.53 to 1%. And then additionally, overall findings are weighted to March 25 ridership. So at a high level, who are our riders? Looking between the three service boards for CTA, the 25 ridership skews younger, with over 60% of riders under the age 44, most of whom do not have a car available for their typical trip. CTA riders are more likely to have full-time employment than not. A significant share reported receiving SNAP benefits, which is indicative of a lower household income, and 16% reported having a disability. CTA riders have a more limited ability to telecommute for their jobs. The age profile of Metro riders skews towards older riders who choose transit, although they are most likely to own a car. The vast majority reported full-time employment, higher household income, and the highest share of the availability of telecommuting, which actually shifted pretty dramatically, though, from 2022. where 3, 4, and 5 day telecommuters are now more likely to be 1 or 2 days per week, a significant increase of about 34 percentage points from the last survey. And then finally, pace riders have seen a shift to younger age groups. Pace riders have the lowest reported household income of the three, are the most likely to receive SNAP benefits, and the most likely to report having a disability. Pace riders have the lowest ability to telecommute among the three, and they thus tend to ride more frequently. So for each of these, I'll go into more detail in the following slides. So first, looking regionally at age, here you can see the distribution of our riders, and we're comparing 2022 on the bottom to 2025 on the top. Overall, survey respondents are trending older. The share of our most senior riders, age 65 and up, increased by 5 percentage points, while the share of riders aged 45 to 64 remained equal. There was a 3% increase in the 35 to 44 group, but lower shares under 18, 18 to 24, and 24 to 34 were observed, with the largest reduction being in the 18 to 24 group, which was about 5% lower in 2025 as compared to 22. In making these comparisons, keep in mind that 2022 was very much still the impacts of the pandemic were being felt on how people were getting around, how people were riding transit. So there's a lot of pretty significant shifts in comparing these two surveys as evidence in the age demographics on screen here, and then some of the things that we'll touch on throughout the survey. The breakdown by gender remained mostly unchanged from 22. So women continue to make up over half of respondents at 54%, male 42%, and then 3% selected a non-binary. Again, the visual on screen is regional. CTA has the highest proportion of female riders among the three at 55%, and that actually did not show a significant change from 2022. Overall, the 25 survey reflected an 8 percentage point increase in the share of white riders, and a 2% increase in Asian riders, while the share of Black riders decreased by 4%, and the share of Hispanic riders decreased by 2%. The majority of riders across the system do not report having a disability. However, in 25, there was a 4% increase in those who reported a disability, about a 15% share of respondents regionally. If you look at individually by service board, the percentage of CTA riders identifying as having a disability increased 6 percentage points compared to 2022. Metro riders identifying as having a disability actually decreased by 4%. And then PACE had the largest share of riders reporting a disability at about 27%. And they saw a slight increase compared to 2022. So this is one where there's difference between the three, and then even differences in comparison from the 22 survey to the 25 survey. Looking at income, reported household income was generally higher in 2025. The proportion of riders with household incomes under 75,000 decreased by 10 percentage points. Each higher income category saw increases, with the largest gains being in the 150,000 plus category, which increased by 8% from 2022. So again, this is the share of riders. It's not necessarily riders making more in the future surveys, but who is riding, who's taking the survey. We're seeing a significant increase in higher income riders in 25 compared to 2022. Again, largely a reflection of kind of what was happening at the time. So then looking at car availability, a typical question that we've asked in the CSS is whether the respondent has a car available for their typical transit trip. So compared to 2022, there was a 2% percentage point increase in the share of riders reporting that they have a car available for their typical trip. So that's 44% regionally, or 56% of riders report they do not have a car available for their typical trip. Again, though, this is an area where the three are quite different from one another. The overwhelming majority of Metro riders, about 80%, have access to a car, which is a slight decrease from 2022, about 3% decrease. CTA and PACE riders, however, are far more transit dependent, with the majority of riders reporting no car availability. 40% for CTA, and 24% of PACE riders having access to a car for their typical trip. Whether or not a household receives SNAP or Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program benefits is a new question in the 25 survey. So SNAP is a federal program that provides food purchasing assistance for low income and no income persons. Overall, the majority of riders do not receive this benefit. So 80% of CTA riders, 97% of Metro riders, and 69% of PACE riders reported not receiving SNAP benefits. Currently, the RTA is doing a pilot called Access with Metra and Cook County that provides a reduced fare for Metra rides for SNAP recipients. So the findings here kind of confirm that expansion of the program to CT and PACE will have the potential to benefit many more riders, as there are more people riding those services already that benefit from the SNAP program. But it also confirms that it would cost a lot more to provide that service. So on a region-wide basis, 82% of riders do not receive SNAP benefits. So then looking to kind of the next key focus areas of how do they ride? How do transit riders use services? For each service board, the most common purpose of travel is commuting between home and work. CTA and PACE riders stated their primary reason was for riding was because they do not have a car available, whereas Metra, the primary reason is to eliminate the stress of sitting in traffic. Slightly more than half of CTA riders use transit 5 or more days per week. CTA riders are overwhelmingly likely to walk to and from their transit trip. The largest share of CTA riders make one transfer, although a nearly identical share of riders make zero transfers, significantly higher compared to the 2022 results. Over three-fourths of CTA respondents report paying a full fare for their trip and use a Ventra card to do so. Metro riders saw significant changes to their telecommute patterns and are now most likely to ride 3 days per week, with large gains noted from infrequent riders that in 2022 they were riding fewer than 3 days per week. Metro riders typically drive alone to the train, and then the vast majority will only use one train before walking to their final destination. More than 8 out of 10 riders pay a full fare via the Ventra app. And then for PACE, more than half of PACE riders use PACE 5 or more days per week. Nearly three-fourths access PACE by walking to a bus, and then reach their final destination by walking. PACE saw a large increase in the share of riders who do not transfer to another PACE bus, now reported by over half of respondents. Nearly three-fourths are paying a full fare, and they're doing so on a Ventra stored value fare product or a Ventra card. Looking at frequency, so compared with 2022, the 25 results show a modest shift in how often riders use transit. The share riding 5 days per week declined by 5 percentage points from 28 to 23, while the share riding 1 day per week or less increased by 4 points from 16 to 20. Daily riders 7 days per week also edged up slightly from 13 to 15. Looking now at trip purpose, work commutes were the most common trip purpose across all service boards, reported by 71% of Metro riders, 67 of CTA, and 63 of PACE. CTA riders were the most likely to report traveling for personal business or errands. Shopping and recreation or entertainment were also frequent purposes. PACE riders reported relatively high use for medical and dental appointments and school commutes. Metro riders, by contrast, were more likely than others to use transit for airport travel and other business related to work. As the service boards continue to grow market share, grow ridership across non-commute trips, it will continue to be really important that we understand these rider needs and satisfaction levels. So the next presentation will cover some of CTA efforts to better understand riders from specific subgroups. Looking then at days used, so system-wide ridership is highest in the midweek. I think anybody that works downtown probably understands this somewhat intuitively, but Tuesday through Thursday have the highest ridership. CTA and PACE ridership remains fairly steady throughout the work week. 72 to 79% of CTA riders and 67 to 76% of PACE riders traveling Monday through Thursday. In contrast, the Metro ridership peaks midweek with 78 to 79% of riders using the service on Tuesday through Thursday. Looking at telecommuting, significant changes were reported regarding telecommuting. So system-wide, the share of riders who are not allowed to telecommute at all has actually decreased by 10 percentage points to just 24. 76% do have some ability to telecommute at least some of the time, and that's regionally. The most common arrangement is to telecommute 1 to 2 days per week, as reported by 29% of survey respondents. 17% reported being able to telecommute 3 to 4 days per week, and 15% can do so 5 or more days per week. So in comparison to 2022, we're actually seeing less overall telecommuting. Again, remember 2022, we were still very much feeling the impacts of the pandemic in terms of how it was impacting, people working and moving around. So we're seeing more as more companies are bringing people back to offices and workplace. We're seeing a decline in overall. But still today, 70% of Metro riders, for example, report having some level of weekly telecommuting availability. So again, kind of connecting back to the two previous slides on days used, trip purpose, it really remains critical for growing ridership that we continue to understand how and when people ride for non-commute trips. And then as a new question in 25, we asked riders what would they do if their current mode of transit was unavailable? So Metro riders were most likely to say they would switch to driving if their current train was unavailable, with 40% indicating this choice. In contrast, CTA and PACE riders were more inclined to remain on public transit or turn to a rideshare option. Among CTA riders, 41% said they would take another CTA bus or train. 21% would use Uber, Lyft, or a similar service. For PACE riders, 22% would switch to another CTA service, and 25% would opt for rideshare. So then, looking to the kind of last key area of what are riders most or least satisfied with, and satisfaction in general. All three service boards received their highest satisfaction scores for onboard staff courtesy, so that's not on the screen, but worth noting. Other kind of high level summaries on the left-hand side, highest satisfaction. So for CTA, that includes service availability, on-time performance. For Metra, that includes onboard personal safety, and then the accuracy of travel information. And for PACE, the highest satisfaction levels are value of service and total trip travel time. And then on the lowest satisfaction side, again, splitting between service boards, for CTA, personal security and onboard cleanliness remain the lowest levels of satisfaction. For Metra, non-rush hour headways, so service kind of outside of the peak. And then for PACE, on-time performance and headways overall remain the lowest levels of satisfaction. Overall satisfactions are shown here, and we're including results from 2016, the last survey that was done prior to the pandemic, and then as well 22 and 25. So overall satisfaction scores with CTA, Metra, and PACE are generally high, scoring in the 70th percentile and higher across all three service boards and across all three surveys shown. Overall satisfaction with CTA has trended downward among the three surveys, but remains fairly high. 70% of riders, again, report being satisfied with CTA, which is a 5% point decrease from 22 and 15% points lower than 2016. Metro satisfaction levels have shown some growth in the most recent surveys, while PACE has remained relatively stable across the three. So then lastly, understanding kind of satisfaction levels and what customers want to see. The next question then becomes where should we focus? So a quadrant chart, which is what you're seeing on screen here, is kind of a map, and it's used to show which factors from the survey shape respondents' overall satisfaction scores. So the chart plots the importance on the Y or vertical axis, and then the satisfaction on the X or horizontal axis, splitting both axes at their means to create kind of four quadrants. And then where something falls into each quadrant kind of has a different meaning. So the upper left quadrant includes items that rank high in importance, but low in satisfaction. These would be attributes that fall in the quadrant that need the most improvement, probably the area we should be focusing the most. The upper right quadrant includes attributes that rank high in importance and high in satisfaction. So these are areas where the service boards need to maintain what they're doing pretty well already, but are key to sustaining kind of a high overall satisfaction rate over time. The lower left quadrant attributes rank low importance and low satisfaction. So these are definitely areas for improvement, but more something that needs to be monitored as it's not the most important thing to riders, but that could change in the future. So definitely something to keep an eye on, but maybe not the bulk of your attention. And then lower right quadrant attributes rank high in satisfaction, but low in importance. So this is honestly probably areas where no action is needed. These are things that aren't that important to customers, and the service boards are actually doing pretty well. They're satisfied with the results. Oh, and then this visualization just shows kind of each one. I didn't realize there was an animation to it. And now we will look at results by service board. Um, CTA first, upper left again shows where CTA should focus. Personal security, cleanliness, real-time info, and accuracy, transit infrastructure are what is most important and where riders are least satisfied. So this would be kind of the key areas to focus on. On the upper right, we see real-time info, getting to destinations on time, and then general service availability as being really important to riders, but something that CTA is doing really well already. So that's more of areas to focus on maintaining what we're doing currently. And then on the lower two quadrants, we see things that are less important and less satisfied. So something to monitor on the left, and then less important but more satisfied, where no action's probably needed. Satisfaction levels are high, and they aren't the most important things to customers right now. Looking at Metra's results, Metra again, the results here show that most effort should be in maintaining levels of satisfaction. So there's a number of things that show up in the upper right quadrant. These are areas that score well currently, but they're really important. They are on-time performance, real-time info, cleanliness, a number of other things. Um, Below, where things that are less important to riders, on the left-hand side, where they're less satisfied, would be the condition of transit infrastructure, amount of time between trains in the rush hour. On the right, total travel time and personal security. Not as critical. Things that are not as important to riders on the left, and then things on the right that are they're doing pretty well and also aren't the most critical elements. And then lastly, looking at pace. For pace, the most important areas to focus are on, which is again is the upper left, accuracy of real-time info, as well as schedule and route information. Things to maintain include customer service, overall availability of services throughout the region. And then on the bottom half, you can see the factors that are ranked as less important to riders, less satisfaction, but less important around transfers and the condition of infrastructure, and then less important but more satisfied around total travel time, cleanliness of the bus interior, and a couple other factors. So in terms of the next steps for the 2025 CSS, so there is a report for each service board, as well as the regional results. These are not finalized yet. They will be soon. All of these are published online, publicly available. This was a long presentation with a lot of detail, but there's actually far more that you can really get into if folks are interested. So keep an eye out for when those are posted and available online. I encourage people to read more if they're interested. And then findings then, will inform where RTA, where the service boards each are focusing efforts around future plans, studies, pilots, and other initiatives to continue to focus on what riders want and how we can improve the system that they rely on. So that concludes the CSS presentation. Over to you, Emily. Emily, you're muted. Are you there?
Yeah, sorry, I wasn't able to unmute myself, so
All good.
had
We can
to
hear you now.
great, had to seek some assistance. Okay, thanks, Peter, and thank you guys to RTA for inviting me to present today. I appreciate it, and I'm excited to share a little bit more about CTA's market research program, specifically our qualitative market research. So you could go to the next slide. All right. So CTA's market research program has grown a lot over the past several years. I've been at CTA for about 9 years and been helping to manage the program since I started here. And we have a couple of different goals of our market research program. I think the main one is really to understand our riders' travel habits and preferences and satisfaction with CTA. And we also try to follow that customer sentiment over time, similar to what Peter was talking about with the customer satisfaction survey. This helps us to keep track of what we're doing well at CTA and where we need to improve. And so I'm just going to touch a little bit about some of the quantitative research that we do before really focusing on the qual side, just to give you a sense of some of the other studies that we do here. We obviously also work with RTA on the customer satisfaction survey. That's a really important initiative that we collaborate with them on every couple of years. So this is a little bit about what we do sort of independent of our work with RTA. So since about mid-2022, we've done some quarterly surveys that have now shifted into a biannual rider survey. This helps us to gauge change in customer opinions and satisfaction over time. We also have some ongoing work, we call them on-the-spot stickers. You can see up at the upper right here, this black sticker. These are up on the system in a couple places, and we're hoping to have some more soon. Customers are able to scan this QR code and either give us some quick information about how their trip went or help report a problem through CTA's chatbot tool. And then we also try to do research focus on specific rider segments. So in the past couple of years, we've done surveys on lapsed riders. We've done one focused on tourists and visitors that use the system, and then a survey focused on our riders with disabilities. And then another thing we do as part of the program is try to gather feedback on new initiatives that are happening. So for example, we reached out to folks who ride our X4 service, which was express service that was implemented over the last couple of years. And we've done surveys of try to better understand what types of bus stop amenities people appreciate when they're waiting for the bus. So these are just a couple of examples of types of surveys that we run through the program. And then we've tried to lean into our qualitative research as well to complement the quantitative studies, just to hear more of those specific stories, hear more of the voice of the customer, which I think can be really powerful when helping to share what people are thinking. I think it helps people to hear those stories and know that they're attached to real people as opposed to just charts and tables and figures. So that's why we've tried to do a mix of both types of research. You can go to the next slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to focus on some results from a series of focus groups that we did beginning in fall 2024 and that have extended into this year. We ran 5 different focus group series. It was actually 10 groups on 5 different topics. So we both focused on segments, like rider segments that were of interest, as well as topics of interest. And the topics were determined in consultation with different leadership at CTA, and really intended to complement some ongoing customer experience work that we're doing at the agency. And that was related specifically to language access and riders with disabilities. So I'll get into that a little bit later. But we worked with a consulting firm to help us design the focus groups, and they helped us sort of recruit respondents, work on discussion guides, and secure facilities, and then moderate the groups. These all took place at a downtown focus group facility. The discussion guides for all these topics were unique, but we often tried to follow our customer journey framework and ask questions about the different parts in the rider journey. So, for example, we would focus on questions about how people would plan their trip on CTA, how they would choose to ride transit over another mode. We would talk about what the experience was like accessing the bus or the train, waiting, riding transit, and then sort of disembarking and making a transfer. So we use that as a framework in a lot of these discussion guides, but there was also like specific topics for each group that we, of course, dove into that were relevant. But we did groups on personal safety, and then the specific segments were women and non-binary riders, caretakers, Spanish-speaking riders, and then riders with disabilities. And riders were provided gift cards for their time and participation. So if they signed up and came to one of our focus groups, they were given compensation for their time. If you go to the next slide. Okay, so as I mentioned, we held 2 groups per topic. We had about 8 to 10 people that participated in each group. And we recruited folks from past surveys. In our surveys, we always have a option for signing up if you're interested in being contacted again for additional research. So we were able to recruit a lot of our participants through that. And then we also connected with some different community groups, especially for riders and customers with disabilities. And then, we tried to make sure that we had a mix of participants across age, geography, race, and ethnicity. It's tough with just, a handful of people in each group. You can't get a perfect representative mix of riders, but we did our best to make sure that voices were diverse and that we were sort of hearing from different types of people and getting those different perspectives. The Spanish groups were moderated by a Spanish facilitator, which was really great. And then we did conduct one of the groups with customers with disabilities virtually. We provided both the in-person and virtual option, which I think worked really well, just to give that flexibility for that group in case it was difficult to make it downtown for an in-person session. And then on the next slide, I'm gonna start to dig into like some of the things that we learned. I have key takeaways for each group, and there's really just like a lot of insights. So I'm not gonna have time to share everything today, but I tried to select the things that I thought were the most interesting and insightful. So you can go to the next slide. Thank you. All right, so I'm gonna start with the personal safety group. So personal security, as you saw from the results that Peter went through and we see on our own surveys that we run at CTA, personal security, especially on the train, is one of our lowest ranked attributes, with over half of customers reporting that they're dissatisfied with this. So this is obviously a topic of interest here at CTA and something that we wanted to do additional research on and learn as much as we can about what our customers are feeling so that we can make improvements. One of the things we learned through this group is that, and through other surveys as well, is that personal security, especially on the train, has a strong gender component, with women reporting feeling much less safe than men on the train. And we were able to dig into personal security as a topic on the women's group as well. But this group did have like a mix of participants of different genders and age and race, and et cetera. So some of the key themes that we heard is that a lot of riders will adapt their travel patterns to reduce risk. So some may ride past their destination a couple stops to avoid maybe certain parts of a neighborhood or a certain stop where they may feel unsafe. Many choose to travel in the daytime and not take trips when it gets dark. Many select the first train car when they're riding the train. And they may even ride bus over train, even if it involves additional transfers or isn't the most direct path to ensure their safety. Building on that, buses generally feel safer than the train. Most riders reported feeling safe or very safe on the bus, driven by the belief that the bus operator could intervene if needed, and just having that like flexibility to adjust or exit earlier if needed without having to go super far out of their way. Another thing we heard is that, staff presence really drives perceived safety. Riders felt that CTA staff, as well as CPD or Chicago Police Department officers, were the most likely to improve their feelings of safety because those groups, they felt like were really invested in keeping the system safe compared to other forms of security. We also heard about the need for improved reporting and consistent communication from the agency. So riders want to hear from CTA when they report something, they want to hear back. They want us to build that trust and know that CTA is taking action. And they want to see just that consistent enforcement of the rules and standards on the system. They reported that problematic riders or disruptive passengers are setting the status quo on CTA and don't always face the consequences, or they're not seeing them face consequences for those actions. So those are some of the insights from the personal security groups. Go to the next slide for me. I'll talk about women and non-binary riders. So this group was interesting. We heard a lot that women and non-binary riders associate CTA with independence, with community, affordable access, and citywide engagement. So they're using CTA as a way to get to activities, engage in, just everyday life, and that it's really meaningful that CTA exists for them to do so. And CTA was a really important part of the reason that they chose to live in Chicago. And that's actually something I'm hearing a lot in different places that, CTA and transit is really important, and people are moving to Chicago because of our great public transit system. So that was something that was echoed in these focus groups as well. In terms of some of the key themes, similar to the personal security focus groups, we heard that safety really guides riders' choices. They prefer the bus over the train for late night and may make adjustments to their travel, especially if it's late or after hours. They actively plan to ensure their safety, making adjustments to which routes they're using, what times they're traveling, and maybe even where they're sitting on the bus or the train. We also heard a lot about cleanliness and comfort and how that shapes their experience on transit. So if things are unclean, like the vehicles, if they're noisy or crowded, or there's people that are being disruptive, that just reduces the appeal of using transit as a way to get around. I think one of the insights that stood out to a lot of folks at CTA was that there's concerns from this cohort about arriving to work after being on the train. If there were some strong odors or something, like it affects how women and non-binary riders are feeling perceived professionally. If they're coming to work and somebody was smoking on the train and their clothes smell like smoke, they're concerned about how their boss or their manager may perceive them. Accessibility and reliability was another topic that came up. So if there's like limited seating, or in order to get from one place to another, it requires a lot of like complex transfers or long travel times. This sort of reduces, again, the appeal of transit and discourages those like social outings or going out to do stuff, and deters this group from riding transit. They really value, services that allow them to get to their destination without, many transfers or lengthy travel times, and just want to be able to get to places quickly and efficiently. You can go to the next slide, please. We also did a group focused specifically on caretakers. We had talked about whether we would combine women and caretakers, but I'm glad that we didn't because, not all caretakers are women. And doing this group separately really allowed us to dig into this topic a little bit more. So we were defining caretakers here as individuals who assist somebody on transit, whether that's like a small child, someone who's an elderly parent, or maybe someone with a disability. That's kind of who was included in this group. And so some of the key themes that we heard was that caregivers face barriers to access that cause some struggles on transit. So for folks that are assisting others riding, things like limited space on the vehicles, ramps that are unreliable, or occupied priority seating makes the trip really difficult, and adds sort of like that stress factor, especially if they're trying to like get to an appointment on time or pick up a child on time. That can cause a lot of unnecessary stress. We also heard that consistency is really important. So long waits and poorly coordinated transfers makes timely and efficient travel challenging, especially during those time-sensitive trips or if there's like really bad weather. We heard also a lot about customer communication. So ensuring that announcements and digital information is well designed, easy to understand is really important, so that people can know what to expect. And that all the information is accessible for people who have visual impairments or other disabilities. And then safety also came up in this group too. Folks that are caretakers have personal safety concerns, especially, disruptive behavior or people smoking. That kind of diminishes the transit experience and makes traveling with somebody else that they're assisting even more difficult. You can go to the next slide. Okay, so the next topic is our Spanish-speaking riders. So this was a really great group. Again, it was moderated by a Spanish facilitator, and we recruited riders that spoke English not at all or not very well. So the groups, again, were done in Spanish, which was it was helpful for me because I was like, oh, okay, I know a handful more words than I thought I did in Spanish. But we definitely had people that helped translate the transcript after, so we were able to understand all the insights. So this was a good group because we learned a lot that like many of our Spanish-speaking riders that use the system a lot, like they're very familiar with CTA. They can generally navigate pretty well, especially for like trips that they make every day. But the trouble comes when things are, there's a disruption or like something goes wrong in their trip. That's when these riders have the biggest challenges. So some of the key themes we heard, again, is that, service disruptions are really challenging. They would struggle to like find useful information or know what to do if something like goes wrong. And sometimes the tools and apps that they rely on for just getting around day to day are not particularly helpful. We also heard that like when riders encounter bilingual staff or people that can speak Spanish, that really just eases their experience. And they reported a lot of like really positive, refreshing experiences. But then if there was no staff available that could speak Spanish, that sort of led to feelings of like disorientation and anxiety. And so it really showed us that like that experience of having someone that can speak your language is really important. And then if that isn't there, right, what are some of the other ways that we can provide information to riders so to help them avoid those like anxiety producing experiences? We also learned that apps for trip planning work well. There was a lot of people that use Google and other apps, and they say like those work really great and help them to navigate, especially for unfamiliar trips. And then, yeah, back to the information piece, like having multilingual information, more information in Spanish, things, that are really important for people to know is like elevator status information or just like announcements about disruptions in other languages would be really useful for this cohort of riders. We'll go to the next one. And then our last group that we did was with riders with disabilities. And this again was the group where we did one virtual and one in person, and we were able to get participants with a variety of different types of disabilities. And it was these groups are really great, actually. So what we heard a lot was that CTA offers freedom to get around the city without having to rely on others. And they talked a bit about how CTA, if they're able to use it, is more convenient than having to book paratransit or use some of these other programs. And again, like provides that independence that was really, really important. So some of the key themes we heard from these groups is that operator training and courtesy is really paramount. It's important for operators to be empathetic and to make sure that they're fulfilling duties like kneeling the bus, deploying the ramp. Riders sometimes, some of the participants reported that they'll have experiences where they're speaking with someone who, maybe accuses them of like not reading something or not listening. And in fact, they are blind or low vision or deaf. And asking for help shouldn't, lead to that type of interaction. So really focusing on making sure that staff are courteous and empathetic and helpful goes a really long way. Crowding is something that came up a lot. Riders described being physically rushed or stepped over while they're trying to board. Sometimes folks that use like a walker or a wheelchair, it takes a little bit longer for them to get on board and settled in. And so they'd like to see operators sort of intervening in those scenarios where other customers are perhaps being like more aggressive or rushing than is needed. They also talked about strollers. That was a definite pain point, and just other people taking place of priority seats, which is really a frustrating experience. And then station infrastructure, of course, came up. I think, we heard about escalators are actually a no-go for a lot of the participants, that cane users like avoided using stations where the escalators were too steep. We heard a lot about participants who like lost their canes or to trying to board when there's a gap. So, infrastructure is an important piece and obviously something that, CTA is trying to actively improve as fast as possible. One other piece related to infrastructure is about broken elevators or escalators, and then ones that were unclean were often like a challenge, and just made the experience of riding transit, more unpleasant than it needed to be. And then last is just information wayfinding. People with disabilities in these groups reported using a lot of different types of apps and technology to get around. One person had a smart cane, which I had never heard of before, which was really interesting to help navigate. And, there's just improvements that are needed. They talked about just ways to simplify some of the language that we use in stations. And just more signage and more clear signage about where to exit and where to transfer would be helpful in easing confusion. Go to the next slide. Thank you. All right, so I just wanted to talk briefly about our customer experience working groups because we sort of designed to do some of this focus group research to feed into these groups. So earlier in 2025, CTA launched a language access working group. This is an internal working group where we brought together staff from different departments across the agency. And the purpose is to develop some projects to help improve the rider experience for customers who speak languages other than English. So as part of the working group, we reviewed just information about like the regulatory landscape, like what CTA is sort of mandated to do. We listened to experience from different community groups. We talked to peer agencies that are working on, making improvements in this space. And then we also listened to the voice of the rider through the focus groups. And as part of the working group, the consensus is we came to a plan to advance 3 different projects to improve the rider experience based on all the things that we heard in this collaboration. And the participants rated the focus groups as one of the most impactful data inputs that they got to help inform what those projects are. And just an example of some of the things that we're working on advancing is we're looking to add some stop announcements on the bus side in Spanish, such as, this is the last stop, so that riders, if a bus short turns, for example, riders that don't speak English will know like that they need to get off the bus. So that's just an example of one of the projects that we're advancing. And then the other is a challenge through our Innovation Studio program to help put some kiosks in rail stations that riders who don't speak English can work with station attendants to communicate, right, if they have questions about how to ride the rail system and don't speak the same language. So those are some projects that came out of this working group, and we're really excited to, help improve the experience for our riders who speak other languages. And then we're following a similar process to the Language Access Working Group. We just kicked off a Customers with Disabilities Working Group in August, following a very similar structure. And we have someone from CDOT that's participating on that group, given that, CDOT has control over a lot of, the right-of-way in the city, sidewalks, et cetera. So we're really glad that they're able to participate in the group and excited to see what comes out of it, but hoping to present the focus group research findings to that group pretty soon. I think I just have one more slide. And then this is just contact information for the program. And we have a website that has a bunch of our quantitative market research up online if you want to page through and take a look. That's all for me. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Emily, for coming and sharing. Great stuff. Very interesting. I've seen a couple questions in the chat. Some have been fielded in real time. We are to the end of the presentations here, so we can open it up for Q&A. Folks can either put their questions directly into the chat or raise their hand and come off mute, and we can ask a question that way as well. I will also put up all the ways to stay connected with the RTA while people are thinking about their questions. I will also just plug again that there is one more installment of the Transportation Tuesday webinar series, which is next week. It's about the fiscal cliff, and it's a conversation between Leanne Redden, our executive director at the RTA, and Jody Holton, the chief planning officer from SEPTA, a region and an agency that is a bit further along in the fiscal cliff process than we are. And it'll be an interesting conversation of what we might learn from another region facing similar circumstances. Seeing a question in the chat, does RTA benchmark against other cities' transit agencies? So we do extensive comparison to peers, both at the mode level, so like CTA bus comparison to a comparable urban bus system. The same with PACE, a suburban bus comparison to a suburban bus. And then we do that at regional scale as well. So if you kind of roll up all of the service board modes into the RTA region, then compare the Chicago region system to at regional scale to other regions. There's 2 reports that are done that you can find on the RTA website that do peer comparison as well as an overall scorecard, both at mode scale and at regional scale. The data for those is largely operational data. It's not necessarily rider data, but it looks at kind of key metrics like ridership, cost per operating hour, vehicle mile, things of this nature. So lots of peer comparisons. I'm seeing Jessica is dropping something in the chat there as well. Great question from Derek. There was another question in the chat that I'll just clarify that was specific to the disability numbers and whether or not they include paratransit riders, specifically on PACE's numbers. PACE operates the ADA paratransit system for the entire region. So the onboard component of the customer satisfaction survey is only completed on fixed route modes. So in terms of people that were like on a bus or train and presented with the option to complete the survey, we only do that on fixed. We don't do that on paratransit. Paratransit riders may have gotten the survey via email or may have experienced the onboard opportunity because many of them also use fixed route. So there certainly is some response in there that would include paratransit riders. Separately, though, PACE does conduct a survey that is specific to the paratransit service and targeted just at paratransit riders. I believe they have one that they've completed recently that will be available soon as well. Another question. How do demographic shifts between 2022 and 2025 compare to pre-pandemic levels? Gender, race, age, etc. Um, the 2022 to 2025 shifts are quite a bit bigger than what you would normally see in a survey. And I think that that is a reflection of how different things were in 2022, where the people riding transit at that point were people that really had to work in person. At the time, you might remember people referred to like essential jobs, things like nurses, people that have to be in person to complete their work. And when the transit system was really reduced down to folks like that, like operators of the bus and rail systems, we saw that big shift in kind of who is still on the system in 2022. In most years, you generally don't see, or not most years, it is kind of a 3 to 5 year window, but you generally don't see that big of a change in any of the demographics. People don't change their habits that fast. The population doesn't change that quickly. So it is really notable how much change there was between 22 and 25. In terms of pre-pandemic, many of the same kind of demographic trends remain. CTA and PACE have always served more riders that are transit dependent. They don't have access to a car. There are many things that track with things like household income, follow with race and other demographics, and that's seen in transit data as well. So in general, I'd say the biggest thing to note between 22 and 25 is really how much it changed. Is very uncommon to see in this sort of a survey. And again, reflection of just how much things have changed in the 3 years since the last one was completed. Uh, Emily, one for you here. Can CTA improve the performance of the unarmed security? I see many on their phones rather than observing.
Yeah, I think, as part of our research, both the quantitative and qualitative research, like we do ask riders, what types of security personnel do they like, do they think would be useful? And so we do hear feedback about the unarmed security guards. That's outside of my purview as someone and, conducting research. But, if it's helpful, like, we do ask our riders about that. And, we hear a lot that like CPD officers and CTA staff are sort of the personnel that riders like to see the most. But there's different opinions and there's definitely riders who like to see, canine, like to see really just any presence of anyone on platforms and trains.
Emily, a second question specific or especially for CTA, do survey results on operating personnel get fed back to the operators? I will note
Yeah.
before you answer that courtesy of staff is something we rate the highest on of in satisfaction levels in the CSS. But yeah, if you could speak more to either surveys or other ways that you guys communicate with riders and how that kind of gets interpreted operationally.
Yeah, sure. So, I think I mentioned in the beginning, like we've been trying to grow our market research program over the last several years, and we do try to make efforts to make sure that the information that we collect gets put in front of leadership across the agency so that people can use the information to make decisions. Does that trickle down to operators specifically? I'm not sure, to be honest, but we do make sure that it goes to leaders throughout the department and staff level folks too. We present at sort of every opportunity that we can get, and post a lot of our information online as well.
Great. Seeing another question about fare type and method across all services. The CSS did not rank fare type specifically around importance. Um, I can say, we ask people what they use, and we can track kind of. I covered that a bit. The Ventra app is 80% on Metra. Some sort of a Ventra card or Ventra stored product is the vast majority on both CTA and Pace. Um, in terms of other ways that we've asked about fares, this is something that we've asked in the panel survey. I know CTA has asked this quite a bit in their smaller customer satisfaction surveys they've done. The question's usually phrased more in terms of what would make you ride more often. And it's like a ranked choice of more service, better safety and security. There's a number of things to choose from. And consistently, fare integration and fare affordability both rank pretty low when compared against things like more service, more frequent bus service, more frequent train service. So that's usually where we see it come up in ranking is of how important it is. It's important. People want fares to remain affordable. They're quite affordable. We've made tons of progress on integration. CTA and Pace products are fully integrated now. We have two regional day and monthly pass products that allow you to ride on all three. Um, so there's been a lot of progress there, and it also isn't necessarily the place that riders point to when they say what would be the most important thing to them to get them to ride more often. It's usually more service characteristics than fares.
Okay, Amy just messaged me and said this might show up on slide 9.
Oh,
Um, it was some sort of ranking of how important are these issues, and toward the bottom is integrated fares.
see if we can get
Source.
there.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, so this is from the dashboard. So these are panel results. And this is a most recent, this would be from the Q2 survey, correct, Amy? Would be the most recent, and ranked priorities around service qualities. Higher transit funding remains top of mind for a lot of people that are part of the panel. Again, that's reflective of all the messaging we are doing around the fiscal cliff. More frequent service is the next thing. Reduced wait times. People would like to see new services introduced, so a new route into their community. And then, consolidated fair payment ranks much lower with things like transparency and consolidated information across the three as well.
And then there is a question in the chat about the fiscal cliff. I asked Kyle on our government affairs team if he would mind hopping on to reply to that.
Yeah, hi everybody. Kyle Whitehead, RTA Government Affairs. Updates on negotiations with the General Assembly, and are you confident a funding bill will get passed during the veto session in October? We are certainly working on it, as are all the transit agencies and many advocates and stakeholders from all across the state. So we are in active conversations with leaders in both chambers as well as the governor's office to try to advance a sustainable funding and reform solution. As to whether it will happen and how confident we are, I mean, we're not in the prediction business, but I could tell you we are advocating strongly, as are many others, for action during the veto session. We do have a fiscal cliff hub that has lots of information about where things are with funding and how you can help as well. You can reach out to your lawmakers at transitnow.org. So that web page, which we can put in the chat if it hasn't been shared already, will be consistently updated. As soon as we have news, it will be there. And we'll continue to identify ways for you to help.
Thanks, Kyle. And thanks all of you for being transit champions. I'm seeing another question from Daniel. Is there fatigue to do surveys quarterly as opposed to biannually? Um, Very fair question. The panel survey, we try to keep it really short, and we consistently get about 1,500 responses, between 1,500 and 2,000. That's been consistent kind of since we started doing this several years ago. We monitor it, but at this point, the way that we have gotten responses, we think that people aren't tired of us yet, so they keep on answering. But very good. Emmanuel asking if there are opportunities for community members to talk about proposing new routes. So outside of the survey work we're sharing today, there are studies that are done at the service boards that studies, plans, different opportunities for engagement. The things I would mention for PACE would be revision is the big one right now that's looking at kind of reimagining suburban bus service in a number of ways. There's the CTA Bus Vision project that Emily has dropped into the chat. And then the Metro strategic plan, looking at kind of transitioning Metro from a commuter service into a more of a regional rail. So I can't speak to any like immediate engagement opportunities. I'm not involved with any of those projects directly, but each one should have some information available online on a website where you can find out opportunities where you can engage with the service board staff on those specific projects in the future. Well, not seeing anything future, any additional questions in the chat. I want to thank everybody again for their time today and listening to this presentation, for the thoughtful questions they posed as well. Thank you, Emily and CTA for participating. It was great to hear about work you guys are doing. And then again, just want to plug one more session of Transportation Tuesdays next Thursday, the 30th, same time, same place. It'll be a conversation about the fiscal cliff. Lots more information there. You can find a link in the chat. We'll hold the line for a few minutes if there's our additional questions. Otherwise, we look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks.